Ever since you can remember, you felt something in your chest telling you to move, to love, to speak, to try. Day after day, you pretend you don't hear it calling, or maybe you dismiss it as silliness or worse. But it's there, ready for you, and it will wait for you as long as you need. My name is Johnny G, and I invite you to join me on a journey of awakening as we dare to embrace our light. This is Refractive. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Refractive Podcast. Today, I have with me a dear friend, Marlon Fixico. He is a descendant on both his mother and his father's side of spiritual leaders and medicine people. He is part of the Cheyenne tribe and the Seminole tribe. How are you, Marlon? Welcome to Refractive.
I'm feeling good today. Thanks, John.
I am delighted that you are with us. You and I had an opportunity to visit not long ago, and you were telling me just a little bit about some of your spiritual history and some interesting things that happened to you. And because Refractive is a show that's all about people kind of stepping into their most authentic selves and listening to their inner guidance and being in touch with kind of that high level knowing of what our souls want for us in life, I thought you would be a valuable guest on the show to share with listeners some of your experiences in that. And so I guess I'll just kind of run down a basic premise of the episode today, and then I'll start digging in. Does that sound okay?
That's good.
All right. So you had told me when we were together just a little bit about your background and how your culture had influenced your spiritual life, your spiritual journey, the awakening that you've had, and all of that. So I would love for you to just take us through that journey for you. What was your spiritual path like?
So, as you said in the introduction, I come from a long line of spiritual leaders and medicine people. Um, I would go down the list, but it's pretty extensive. But just suffice to say, even my immediate parents were very spiritual and healers. Um, they never like advertised that's what they were. That's just who they were.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a mark of a true spiritual leader is they don't need to tell you that they are. You just somehow people just find out and they just know.
Yeah.
And so I grew up a lot with my Cheyenne grandmother, my mother's mother, and in my formative years. And she's the one who taught me a lot of the things that I later in life rediscovered, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Was
she,
spirituality something that in your earlier life, like when you were an adolescent, were you open to kind of receiving that wisdom from your family?
uh, I would say there was a turning point when I was around 12 where I stopped caring about spiritual things.
Mm-hmm.
Previous to that, I used to go to, in the summer times, uh, I grew up in Oklahoma City, but my grandmother lived in rural Oklahoma. And in the summer times, I would spend it with her, and we would go to Indian ceremonies, do a lot of camping and fishing, and just out in nature a lot. And then go to a lot of powwows.
Mm-hmm.
So I was raised around spiritual ceremonies. People would come and they'd have all night prayer services at my grandmother's house. And, I was a little kid. I didn't really know what was going on. I just knew they had this big breakfast in the morning, which I really enjoyed. I would sleep through the prayer service and wake up in time for breakfast.
Yes.
but but I remember at one point I was about, I don't remember exactly when, 7 or 8. Um, first or second grade, I was spending the summer with my grandmother, and this white lady came, and she and grandma had this long talk. I didn't know what they were talking about. The next thing I knew, I was going to Sunday school. I didn't know it was Sunday school. I just got in the car with this white lady and went to this building where all these white people were. And they were talking about something called God. And then after I got home that day, I asked grandmother, what was God? I said, they kept talking about God at that place. She said, well, in the Cheyenne language, the word for God, what we call God, is Mahil. Mahil means we don't know. We don't know what it is, but it's everything.
Hmm.
And from that point forward, it just stuck with me as a 7 or 8 year old kid. Grandma said that's what it was, and that's what it was.
That sounds like a
And
good word for God. You know what I mean? I don't know what it is. It's just that.
yeah, it's just everything. It's everything. And so for a long time, I would hear people speaking about God, and that's what was in my mind. But around 12 years old, 11 or 12, my father, he was an alcoholic, and he stopped drinking at that age, my age, and started going to church. And once he started going to church, he said I couldn't go spend any more time with my grandmother because she was pagan and she was going to go to hell.
Hmm.
So I knew that was wrong, but he was dad. So I started going to a different kind of church. It was a Native American church, but it was Southern Baptist. It was kind of a conjunction of Southern Baptist and Native American. They spoke our language, they sang our language, but it was basically Southern Baptist.
Okay.
And so I adapted to that, and then I started adopting this idea. They talked about from time to time that you know men shall not lay with another man; it is abomination. So that was like emblazoned in my brain because I like men,
And how
and
old
I
were
didn't.
you?
I was around 11 or 12,
Okay. Yeah.
and it continued on until I left home at 18. But I struggled for all those years with my spirituality and sexuality. I knew that
Hmm.
there was God. I prayed to God to change me all the time.
Hmm.
Uh, but um, that never happened. So I went to college, and I was in love with my best friend who was straight.
Hmm.
Nothing happened between us, but um, eventually he got a girlfriend, and we split up. We didn't spend as much time together, and I found a woman who was just as crazy as I was, and she was the first person I told that I was gay,
Yeah.
and we became best friends. She didn't care. She was like, "Oh yeah, that's fine. It's no big deal to me." So we stayed together for like 6 months, just hanging out and getting drunk and having fun and going to school and everything that people do in college. But when the time came to graduate, I couldn't imagine my life without her.
Hmm.
So I told her that, and she said, "Well, does that mean you want to get married?" It's not really.
That's a proposal for you right there.
Exactly. But I thought about it. I said, "Oh, that makes sense. Okay, yeah, let's get married."
Let's do it.
And so we were married for 5 years. We have two kids,
Hmm.
and then eventually the alcoholism took its toll on our relationship, on our marriage.
Hmm.
And I left her, and I went to Washington D.C.
Hmm.
and became gay. No, I was already gay, but uh, I was just. It was 1983, and it was at the height of the AIDS crisis, and it was just getting to be a big thing. I remember the Time magazine came out with a big article, had the word AIDS on the front, and I just thought I was going to die. I mean, I
Yeah.
had this Christian upbringing that said that what I was doing was wrong, and I said, "Well, if it's wrong, then I'm just going to go for it." and I didn't care. I left my children, which were the most important thing to me. But then it was horrible. And
Mhm.
so I drank for about 18 years. I was 37 when got sober in Washington, D.C. And I was at that point that I was sober for about a year. And then I started seeing things and having visions and having dreams.
Yeah.
And my grandmother was she would come to me in my dreams a lot. Um, I had a therapist too who did guided meditation,
Yeah.
and my grandmother appeared during his guided meditation. She was right there. I was like, okay. It was funny because he would talk to her. He would ask me a question, and she would answer, and so
Yeah.
I would just tell him what she said.
Yeah.
But she's always been with me. She's like um, my guardian angel.
Yeah.
Um, and she's the Cheyenne uh, grandmother. So um, on my dad's side, I trace this back to before the Seminoles were transferred from Florida. And my ancestor was the leader of the tribe at the time when they were being transferred.
Mhm.
And my grandmother's, my father's male lineage, that was him. But
Mhm.
on my grandmother, on his mother's side, her ancestor was a medicine man who was partners with the leader who came. So they was like, we have all this connection between the leaders and spiritual people.
Yeah.
And the Seminoles tribe really have a lot of myths and stories about medicine people.
Okay.
They can control the weather. Uh, they can make love potions, and they can make you sick.
Mhm.
So there are all kinds of stuff. Anyway, I grew up in all of this with my my grandmother's, my mother's line. There were uh, it- well, the biggest one, his name is Black Kettle. He was a peace chief who
Mhm.
was killed by George Custer
Mhm.
back in 1868
Mhm.
in Oklahoma. It wasn't Oklahoma yet, but um, so and then my grandfather, her husband, um, he was the first leader of the Native American church, which
Mhm.
people know as Peyote Church.
Okay.
And I don't know if people know, but I mean, there's a lot of resurgent research on hallucinogenics and
Mhm.
how helpful it is, especially to addicts.
Mhm.
The trouble with what happened in the 60s was that they were using it in a proper way,
Mhm.
recreationally, and it was never meant to be recreational.
Mhm.
So, anyway, the Native American church has a very strict uh, guidelines on how to use peyote
Mhm.
and done in ceremony. And anyway, so my grandfather he was on a tribal council. He was the first president of the Native American church, and I had all these things on me growing up. You know, in grade school, we took Oklahoma history, and they talked about Black Kettle, and I knew he was my ancestor.
Mhm.
But after more and more I learned about all these people in my ancestors, it was like this heavy burden. It's like, well, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
And my mom, she wanted me to become a preacher, a Seminole Baptist preacher, which I did do some preaching when I was a teenager.
Mhm.
But I mean, I was one of the biggest hypocrites. So I was having sex with boys and at the same time going to church to preach.
Yeah.
But but so I rebelled against all of it. And so by the time I went to college and I started drinking, it was out of the I wanted to get out from underneath of being that legacy. I
Yeah.
didn't want to be a spiritual person. I didn't want to be a spiritual leader. I didn't want to learn medicine. I didn't want to do any of it. And then, fast forward, uh, 18 years later, I got sober, and all these things come to me. And I don't tell this to many people, but I can see people's auras.
Mhm.
I remember when I told my therapist that, and I thought I was, I had to be honest because that's how therapy works.
Yeah.
And so he showed me these pictures from this book by, I forgot her name, but anyway, it's called Hands of Light. And it was all about studying uh, supernatural phenomena.
Yeah.
And she had pictures of people with auras, and I was like, exactly what I saw. And so I didn't feel so crazy after he showed me that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then I got sober through 12-step programs,
Mhm.
and the more I heard them talk about the principles of the program, the more I heard my grandmother. I mean, the things that she taught me, she didn't sit down and say, this is this and this is that. She just lived it. And then I watched her. And um, so when they would talk about things, that's what my grandmother used to do. That's what my grandmother used to say. And then it came little bit by little bit, it came back to me.
Mhm.
And I realized that um, whether I wanted to be a spiritual person or not, I was.
Yeah.
I mean, we all are.
That's the thing. Yeah.
So I started becoming more just open. I don't, there's a lot of, I'm in college, I studied engineering,
Mhm.
and I really love physics. And there's a scientific explanation for everything.
Oh, I can't believe you're going there. I can't believe you're going there, Marlon, because let me tell you something. Like, okay, I am just enraptured with all of these concepts of how spiritual phenomena are really manifestation, or physics actually it on this plane manifests from spiritual phenomena, right? Like the whole idea of waves and frequency, and the idea of even things like surface tension. And there's just so many aspects of physics that is mirrored to spiritual phenomena that we read about and that we hear about, that it blows your mind if you go down this rabbit hole. So you just got me really excited when you mentioned that. But sorry, go ahead, keep going, keep going.
That's okay. One of what you just remind me. One of the big things for me is the idea of what the nature of light is. It's like, is it a wave or is it a linear?
Mhm.
Uh,
Particle.
yeah,
Hmm.
but it's like it's both,
Hmm.
and that's what spirituality is. A spiritual spiritual things are paradox. It's like,
Yeah.
how can it be one thing and the other thing at the same time? But it can, and it is. And I used to share that with my sponsees over and over again. It's
Mhm.
like, how can you be sad and happy at the same time? You can.
There is a writing by Gary Zukov, who, if people were fans of Oprah, they'll recognize Gary Zukov because he was a guest over the years many times when she had spiritual topics. But he talks about how um, in this interesting situation where light is both a wave and a particle, that um, whether it appears as a wave or as a particle is dependent upon the intention of the observer. That the way the experiment is designed dictates whether light appears as a particle or as a wave. and that this is a beautiful parallel to our lives, that we are the creator, we are the architect, and that it is our intention of how we wish to view an object that causes the object to take that form. And it just, oh, I love it. It gives me goosebumps. I have goosebumps right now when I let
Mm.
myself sink into that. So I love this. And I didn't know that you had that scientific background.
Yeah, it really. So, I mean, the point of that for me is that there are many supernatural things that I have experienced in my lifetime,
Mhm.
and that are seemingly unexplainable. But if I would have told a scientist some of the things that I experienced, they could figure out a scientific explanation. But
Mhm.
to me, it doesn't matter if you can explain it or not. To me, it's just I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know what it is, but it's everything.
Yeah.
So, I'll back just to back up a little bit. I went when I was in college. I was before I met my then wife. I was about 19, 18 or 19. I can't remember. But I had a roommate. I was 19. It was my second year, and my roommate was 35, which I thought was old at the time,
Mhm.
and
Wow.
and he was from a reservation in Wyoming, Wind River Reservation, and he was a apprentice to a medicine man. And so on spring break, he invited me to come home with him, and so I did. And we during the week we built three sweat lodges. He was the medicine man that he worked with. Uh, what he would, whenever somebody would need a healing or somebody was sick or somebody was in trouble, and so we would go out and have a sweat lodge at their house. One of them was actually in the mountains. It was beautiful. But the third one, uh, I went in and the medicine man said that he saw that I had seven spirit people they told him that they had come into the world when I was born and that they would be with me until the day I died.
Mhm.
And that if I needed anything, that they would, if I asked them in a proper way, they would help me, and they would do their best to protect me. Not that if I did some stupid things, my medicine man didn't say that. He said, you can choose wrongly and you might die. I'm not saying they're going to protect you from everything, but they'll protect you as much as they can. And so that wasn't great for an alcoholic because I really put them to the test
Well, I
many
bet.
times. But uh, the last thing was that he gave me this. It was like a root. Some of my friends said it was probably valerian root, but I don't know. I didn't ask him. It was just a really, really tiny piece of wood to me. He told me to chew on it and then spit it in my hands and then wipe it on my face. And he said, "Don't do this until you're ready to go to bed." And so my friend who I went there with was sitting right next to my bed. Um, and I did what he said, and I rubbed my face with that stuff, and I laid my head down, and I went right to sleep. Next thing I know, I was flying in the air, and I was freaked out. I was like, "Holy moly!" And I started to say something, and out of my mouth came this eagle scream. And I was like, "What is that?" And then I looked at my arms and they were wings, and I could feel the wind holding me up in the air as I glided on the wind. And I looked around and I saw a forest and I saw mountains, and I went and landed on a branch. It was a pine tree branch, and I could feel the weight of my body as it landed on the branch, and I grabbed it with my claws. I mean, all these little minute details I still remember to this day. And then I looked in and saw these mountains, and I decided to go to the mountains. I wanted to go see how high I could go. So I started going toward the mountains, and then beneath me, I saw a river, and I could see the sunlight rippling off the top of the little waves on the river,
Yeah.
and I could see beneath the surface, and there was a salmon. It wasn't real big, but it was a good size. And I thought I could pick up that salmon. And the salmon said, "Well, if you could catch me." And I said, "What?" I didn't know salmon could talk. And
Well,
so
we didn't know
then,
an eagle could talk either.
and then so I said, "Can I catch you to eat?" And he said, "Well, if you can catch me, you can eat me." And so I went down, and it was really easy. I caught it, but he started flip flopping all over the place. And I had a good hook on him. I mean, my claws were into him, but he knocked me off balance. And I landed on a sandbar in the middle of the river, and I thought I was going to break my wing or something, but I just tumbled, and with him still in my claws,
Uh-huh.
and it didn't hurt. It's like, wow, that was interesting. And so then I started eating the salmon, and then I could still taste how delicious it is in my mouth. I mean, to this day, I love salmon. And all of a sudden, over this ridge, there was a big bear, and he was all growling. I want that. I want that fish. And I just looked at him, and I said, "I'm done. I'm full. You can have the rest." So I just took off, and the bear came down and ate the rest of the fish.
Yeah.
And I flew to the mountains, and I flew up higher and higher and higher. And I remember I couldn't go any higher. And I just landed on this cliff, this little ragged edge. And then I looked, and I felt like I could see the whole world. It was like forever.
Mhm.
I could see cities and fields and other mountains, and it was just, it was amazing. And that's when I woke up. And I told my friend that, and my friend said that the eagles are your family,
Mhm.
and that all the birds are your cousins, your first cousins. We're related to everyone, all the animals. But if you ever need any help, what to do, the eagles will show up, and they will help you. And I can't tell you how many times I was lost, either emotionally or physically, and an eagle would show up.
Wow.
When I buried my son, um, three eagles came over and showed me the spot where I was supposed to bury him.
Oh my.
And so I have a real affinity for eagles.
Yeah, that's powerful. So what being at such an early age, right? You were maybe 19 when that happened. Um, did were you ready for that to influence you in life, or did that have to come back later and influence your path at a later time?
Thanks for saying that. I forgot to tell you the last part of the message from the medicine man was, you are a powerful spiritual leader, and your people need you, and you can start right now, today. But if you don't, you can go the other path, and
Hmm.
there's no guarantee that you'll live. But if you do live, you'll still be the leader that you're supposed to be, but it's up to you. And so, of course, I chose the other path. I became, I became
The party path.
the party path,
Yeah,
uh,
I'm familiar
and
with that path.
so so yeah, it did and didn't. I just sort of, I tucked it away in my mind, that as a way to, I don't know. It was like I felt invincible, which is not a good thing.
Mhm.
It's like it made me take really stupid choices
Yeah.
and do things that I should have done. I mean, I'm 64 years old. I came into out gay man in 1983,
Mhm.
and I don't know how many times, how many people, how many men
Mhm.
I had unprotected sex with, and
Mhm.
I'm HIV negative.
Yeah.
So it's like all my friends that I lived with back then, they're all dead,
Yeah.
and most of them died of AIDS. And I don't know how I'm not,
Yeah.
but I'm not for a reason, and I accept that. So
Where does
yeah.
that put you today then? Like, what is your, now that you have the experience of recovery to kind of clear your mind and clear your spirit, and you have these formative experiences, how did how did your spirituality finally take shape?
Well, I part of part of me is missing. I'll be honest. I have a part of me belongs in Oklahoma, and
Mhm.
I have every intention of moving back there. You know, before the end of the year, hopefully.
Yeah.
I there's ceremonies and there's other things. I just feel drawn that there's whatever part of my next journey is there. Um, but in the meantime, I spent a lot of time in Washington. Especially, I spent 18 years of my sobriety in Washington, working with um, other addicts and alcoholics. You know, mostly men, mostly gay men, but there was a handful of straight people and a handful of women, and I I just shared whatever I have with them, my sponsees.
Hmm.
And now that I'm in Idaho, I moved back because my ex-wife was dying and my children wanted to be close to her before she passed away.
Hmm.
And so now she's gone. That's come I want to move back to Oklahoma because she's gone.
Hmm.
But my grandchildren are the most important thing to me. Everything that I have, I want to pass on to them so
Yeah.
that they can pass it on. So there's a lot of, I mean, when I go back to Oklahoma, one of the things that medicine people do is kind of like a priest. It's like when people are sick, you go pray for them, and when people die, you go and officiate their funerals, and then people have celebrations. You become like a MC for their family to talk and keep people moving and going, and just be an advisor to people who are seeking spiritual advice.
Yeah.
So that's where I feel drawn to next.
Okay.
Um, so does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned, speaking of kind of the phenomena aspect that you've experienced, you mentioned last time we talked that you had, would I don't know if it's appropriate to call it a near death experience or what, but
Yeah.
you said that you went into a coma in a period of hospitalization in the past year, and that while you were in a coma for a period of time, you had some experiences that have been formative for you. So, would you tell us a little bit about how all that came about?
So I contracted COVID at the beginning of December, and I was in a coma for well, I woke up from my coma on um, December 24th, Christmas Eve.
Okay.
Um, and um, while I was in a coma, just before I woke up, I did die twice.
Mhm.
I They took me off the ventilator, and I wasn't able to breathe on my own. My heart stopped,
Mhm.
and so they put me back on, and then they did that twice. And so the third time, they said, "We're going to take him off. If he doesn't make it, he doesn't make it." And so third time, I kept on going, so I woke back up. But uh, in that last part, I don't know. I mean, time is different when you're just in a dream state.
Yeah.
So I saw I was in the hospital room where I was, and I in the hallway was a bright light coming from the end of the hallway. I couldn't see
Mhm.
the light. I just could see it was lighting up the walls.
So, did you see your body? You mean, like, were you like looking down on yourself, or were you as if you were laying in the bed?
I was laying in the bed.
Okay.
I was laying in the bed, and I could hear my parents. Oh, it was my mother first, and she told me that everything was going to be okay, and that I could come with them, um, and they would take care of me. And I felt already a sense of warmth and calmness.
Mhm.
Um, and my and then I have a younger brother who's 10 years younger than me. He passed away 2 years ago, and he was there. And he said, "Yeah, why don't you come and we'll have a great time." I really wanted to be with him too.
Yeah.
And then my father, my father being my father, is typical of him. So he kind of got onto my mom. He said, "Quit trying to tell him what to do. He needs to make up his own mind." He says that you're influencing him. And my mom said, "Well, yeah, I am." But and she said, "I want him to come with us. He's not doing really well." And Dad said, "He'll be okay." I said, "What's?" But it's up to him. And then he spoke to me directly. He said, "Son, if you want to come with us, you can come with us. But if you don't want to come, you don't have to. It's up to you." And I thought about it for a minute, and I almost decided to go. And then I remembered my two daughters, and their mother had just died a year before that, and I didn't want to put them through that. I just kept thinking, no, I can't put them through that. So I said, no, I'm going to go back.
Mhm.
And and then I'm back. Um, but ever since then, it's hard to describe my feelings and attitudes toward death. I could tell you that I don't have any fear, but it's more than that. It's just like it's a part of breathing. Dying is a part of breathing.
Mhm.
I mean, you stop and it's okay. You just stop this thing, whatever we call life, and then you go to the next thing, whatever it is. I don't know what it is, but I'm not afraid of it. And, you know, it sounds kind of morbid, but, I look forward to going when it's my time. I really look forward to it. It's
Yeah.
like, it's something to look forward to, not to something to be afraid of.
Mhm.
That's part of it too, yeah.
Would you say that would you say that you feel kind of a shifting in your mission after that, since you kind of specifically thought of your children and maybe even grandchildren, uh, and that's why you made the choice to come back? Or is that not a part of uh, your math right now?
I I don't really think it is. I was reading an article about different types of people. We talk about that in the program. There's all kinds of people with different sort of personality traits, and I'm the type of person who is a very spontaneous. I don't like to make plans, uh, and I don't mind having a goal, something to work towards, but it's got to be very big. It can't be like concrete because it feels like, it's like if I make a plan to make, $100 million, and that's one thing. If I make $100,000, like, wow, I made $100,000, and I didn't even make $100 million. I don't care. But
Yeah.
it's like it's more of a what I call in math vector. It's like it's a direction to
Mhm.
go. It's not something that I want to necessarily achieve.
Mhm.
And so having all this near death experience, it just sort of reinforces that life is short. I don't know what's going to happen around the corner. I'm going to wake up in the morning, and what my biggest experience I could share with people is that in the moment that I'm living is the moment that I know what I'm supposed to do next.
Yes. Oh. Keep going. Keep
So
talking.
it's like it's never failed me. I mean, there's many times when I was leading a meeting, or one time when I was in college, I was a part of what's called American Indian Science and Engineering Society, and we always have a ceremony at the beginning of the annual conference and at the end of the annual conference. and there was a Navajo student who was we had co-leaders, and so at the very last uh, session, we decided to put together. Well, I brought a shell with some cedar. And she bought a bowl of water. The Navajos have this water ceremony, and we have the sage cedar ceremony. So I brought the cedar, and she brought the water. And people, whoever wanted to share, would come up to the center of the room, and there must have been like 300-400 people in that room. And it was the middle of a ballroom, and we were sitting in the center, and they would come to the middle, and I would smudge them, and she would sprinkle some water on them, and then they would share. Um, Afterwards, there was a man who said, "How did you guys come up with that ceremony?" And we thought of it about 30 minutes before the session. We just put it together at the last second. I had the shell and the cedar, and she just took a bowl from the hotel,
Hmm.
and we said we didn't know. We just did it. And he said that you have all the elements of church. There was a smoke, uh, what we call incense,
Hmm.
and then there was the water for like a baptism. And we didn't even think of it that way.
Yeah.
We just did it. But that whole experience is, I mean, it, I remember hearing the people talk, and it was like very deep and very moving and very powerful. And I knew that we were doing the right thing, but I didn't know what we were going to do before we did it. And that's has always stuck with me. Like whenever my sponsees would say, well, somebody who's sponsoring other people would say, "I'm supposed to go talk to this new person, and they want me to be their sponsor, but I don't know what should I say to them." I said, "Don't plan on it. Just go up and show up. You'll figure it out.
Yeah.
When they start talking, you'll know what to say."
That's
And
right.
it has always worked for me.
Yeah. Yeah. The answer is in the stillness, right? Like that's what I believe, that you have everything you could ever need to know inside you if you're just brave enough to go in and look for it. You know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I like that. Answers in the stillness.
Yeah. Let me ask you, as we kind of ramp down towards the end of the episode, I realized when you and I were sitting together that I have such a lack of knowledge around um, well, I mean, Native American culture in general, but like especially what interests me at this point in my life is Native American spirituality. And so I'm gonna ask a question, and you may not be prepared to answer this, so please feel free. But do you have any resources that you might recommend if there is a listener who's interested in learning more about understanding that there are dozens and dozens and dozens of different perspectives within just the American Native American spirituality, right? But do you have any resources that you'd recommend for people who want to learn more about some of those unique journeys?
Yeah, I get to ask this question from time to time, and my response is that wherever you are, whoever is hearing this as we're talking on this podcast, wherever you are, there is a resource. Um, and if your heart is, I don't want to say true or sure, I'm sure it is, but if it's a really meant for you to be, you will find what you need to find. The old teacher, I mean, the old thing is like when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Yeah,
And that's basically how it works. Every, tribe, different parts of the country are different.
yeah,
And if you see someone, someplace who looks native, and you feel drawn to them, just go up to them and introduce yourself, say hello,
mhm,
and just become friends with them. And then listen, get to know them. Don't jump in first and say, "Well, I want to learn about native spirituality," because there's a lot of what we call wannabe Indians and New Age
Mm,
Indians,
mhm.
which it's a big turnoff.
Yeah, yeah.
So so if you're real sincere about it, then get to know one on one a person. And I would say pray first, because once you put it into uh, the universe will respond, and
Mhm.
it'll connect you with the right person that you're meant to be taught by the things you need to know.
Yeah,
And because I mean, there's all kinds of. I mean, you can go and find books on Native American spirituality. I mean, just go on Amazon and do that. But it's all words,
yeah,
and it's more than just words or knowledge. It's experience. It's a one-on-one experience with other human beings,
yeah.
and that's what you're really asking, is for that connection to something you'd feel drawn to. I meet people all the time who feel drawn to Native American culture, and I watch them. I watch them actually, you know, go and go to a powwow, go to a sweat lodge, go to a Sundance, make friends with other Native people, and they achieve what they want to achieve. Uh,
Mhm.
there's a lot of work to be done. We'll gladly have you if your heart is in the right place.
Yeah, yeah, that's very rich. Good. Thank you, Marlon. I'm so grateful that you came and shared some of your experiences with us today, and opened the just opened the book of Marlon up a little bit for for us to read a few lines. And yeah, and I'll tell you, if any listeners have any questions, just email them to me, Johnny, JOHNNY, at refractivecoaching.com, and I can get them to Marlon and get you an answer. And yeah, so with that, Marlon, I just want to again say thank you so much for coming on the show.
I will say, I don't know if it's jumping over you, but um, I'm on Facebook. So Marlon
Perfect.
Fixico. Just do a search for Marlon Fixico. You'll find me. I've been on there for many, many years.
Okay, perfect. I will link that on the podcast notes then for anyone who opens their app and sees that. Perfect. All right, my friend. Well, enjoy the rest of your day. I'm sending you so much love and light. And, as always, everyone, remember to be good to each other and aim your light. Take care. You have been listening to Refractive Podcast, and this is Johnny G. If you've enjoyed today's episode, do me a favor, give it a share on social media, or if you're in the podcast app, give it a rating. If you're on YouTube, click like. It really does make a difference in the search results. I am a speaker, coach, and facilitator based in Washington, D.C., but I work in person and remotely with people who are ready to step with clarity into their most authentic life. If I can be of service, reach out to me, Johnny, JOHNNY, at refractivecoaching.com. Have an amazing day. Be good to each other. And always remember, aim your light.